and that there are still a lot of questions around data related issues and risk and sort of data protection, all those types of things. And so I think that there's a lot of work to do around understanding all of that before people really feel comfortable sort of diving in deeper. But that's not to say that you shouldn't be diving in.
Welcome back to the Tourism AI podcast. We are joining you once again to tell you about the latest and greatest in artificial intelligence as it relates to the tourism industry. Today, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on some of the marketing pieces related to AI, but really going to be diving into some of the things that the Tourism AI Network can really offer your organization as a DMO or a tourism operator. So we are going to start with one of Deloitte's latest surveys on generative AI in the industry. Well, not the industry, but all industries and enterprise, I should say. Peter, tell us a little bit about the significance of this quarter's findings that Deloitte's put out. What are they telling us? What's the 411?
Yeah, so I think the kind of at the highest level, what this Deloitte survey, first of all, it's called the State of Generative AI in the Enterprise, now decides next. And so they gathered insights from 2,770 businesses and technology leaders across 14 countries in 6 industries. And so, I mean, overall, I would say that the report talks about the fact that organizations are sort of, they're doing a lot of experimentation, but they're still struggling to turn that experimentation into sort of strong, sort of longer term processes and sort of really to bake generative AI more fully into their organizations. So the report kind of talks about some struggles at the enterprise level, which I'm not surprised about. I mean, I think this is all still very new, and while we're all in a big rush to get all this stuff adopted, this is very, very new. And if we think about, things like when the internet came into existence, I mean, most companies didn't get even on the bandwagon for quite a few years. There was obviously the early adopters and they did well, but it takes a long time for this type of technology to be baked into organizations. It just sort of takes time, right? So basically a couple of the findings from the report: 67% of organizations are increasing investments in generative AI due to strong early value, but 68% have moved 30% or fewer of their generative AI experiments into production. So that sort of says that, again, there's still a lot of experimentation happening, but a lot of this experimentation isn't turning into sort of longer term baked in generative AI products and services. And then only 23% feel highly prepared for generative AI related risk management and governance challenges. And then 41% struggle to define and measure the exact impacts of generative AI efforts. And 55% have avoided certain generative AI use cases due to data related issues. So I'm going to take a pause there and obviously talk about the fact that obviously Deloitte is focused on the enterprise and the very large companies, but we've been doing a lot of adoption frameworks, or I shouldn't say a lot. We've done a few AI adoption frameworks over the summer, which have really been our opportunity to experiment with and learn from our tourism industry partners on kind of AI adoption at the smaller business level. And what I will just say is that many of the issues raised by this Deloitte survey are kind of consistent actually with what we're seeing at the DMO level, at the smaller organization level, and that there are still a lot of questions around data related issues and risk and sort of data protection, all those types of things. And so I think that there's a lot of work to do around understanding all of that before people really feel comfortable sort of diving in deeper. But that's not to say that you shouldn't be diving in. And so I think that it's important to create some differentiations when it comes to risk. There's a lot of things you could be doing with generative AI today that really don't have a lot of risk attached to them. And, for example, you can put in all your Google reviews into ChatGPT and say, give me all the trends that you're seeing from all of these Google reviews about my business and give me recommendations on how I can make my marketing offering more impactful based on these reviews. There's no risk there. I mean, those are public reviews, right? So there's a lot of public information. So that's different, obviously, from, adding proprietary information or financial information. Obviously, we don't want to be doing those things yet, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say these results are pretty consistent with, data that we've seen in reports in the past. I think the one sort of difference we're seeing with this one is there's a little bit more of a pickup in terms of building, companies building their own custom solutions for their needs. But it still sounds like they're hitting bumps in the road and not necessarily taking those tools into fruition fully. What do you have to say about that, Peter?
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity for me to introduce what I've been calling our AI adoption hierarchy. So I'm just working on an infographic right now, which is really a hierarchy on AI adoption and sort of helping people understand the different steps involved when it comes to AI adoption. And so, just to sort of give some context, I'm not going to talk about this in a lot of detail right now, but for example, just using a free generative AI tool out of the box, so let's call it a chat GPT or whatever, without being in a paid account. That's sort of the lowest form of AI adoption, right? I mean, that's just sort of playing around with the tool. And then from there, obviously when you buy a paid subscription to a paid tool, that's the next level up because it gives you more features, more benefits, more use cases, that type of thing. And then, it sort of goes up from there, right? So, then it's customizing the tools for your unique benefit, creating custom GPTs or, whatever as the next step up. And then, there's low code, no code tools that allow you to create automations using generative AI tools. That's sort of the next step up. And then there's, sort of accessing these tools with an API connection and sort of building more slightly more customized solutions is the next, sort of step up in the adoption framework. And, there's also open source tools. So tools that you can actually, download onto your computers and on your networks and then, pre-train on your data. So that's sort of the next step up. And then, full on AI process creation. And so I just want to, and there's a few steps in between all of those, but just for context, when this Deloitte survey talks about generative AI production deployment challenges, that's different. That's getting higher up in the hierarchy, and that's kind of more about sort of longer term baked in AI solutions and tools that enterprises are trying to create to sort of generate value for either for themselves or for their customers. That's very different from, I think, where a lot of destinations and tourism marketers and tourism operators are at, which is really just playing with tools, understanding which tools they could use, getting the most out of those tools. And I'm seeing, based on our AI adoption framework and some of the training we've been taking people through, is that that's where people are at for the most part. I mean, it's obviously people are all over the place when it comes to AI adoption, but for the most part, smaller businesses are just like, what are the tools? How do I use them? What are the best practices? How can I get the most out of these tools? Right. So that's where people are at. And so Tourism AI Network is really going to be focusing there a lot over the next little while. And, so we're going to be introducing very soon something I'm excited about, which is Tourism AI Academy. And Tourism AI Academy is going to be all about giving people short, say 3 to 5 minute videos on, here's how to get the most out of this, or here's a neat tool for creating. Actually, just this weekend, I played around with a tool called Ideogram. So Ideogram is an image generation tool that's the best in the market at creating images that actually spell words correctly. So, these are valuable things for a lot of people in the tourism industry in terms of, hey, here's a great tool. Why don't we show you the tool, show you how to get the most out of the tool, show you some best practices and get you going. So we're going to be launching that soon. I'm sort of going to be pushing the team to launch it as soon as possible. And then what we're going to be doing is introducing a subscription model. So where you're going to be able to basically subscribe for monthly and get access to all of these training videos. The other thing we're going to be creating is custom GPTs or other sort of generative AI tools where we're going to be creating these sort of AI products, simple AI products or custom GPTs that do very specific tasks based on what we're hearing from our tourism partners on solutions they need. Hey, I do this all the time and man, it would be great if there was a solution that could help me do this better or more effectively. Okay, well, let's create something for you. So when you get access to Tourism AI Academy, you're going to get access to things like these really custom little GPTs or other tools that solve very specific problems or challenges that we're hearing very consistently in the tourism sector. That, honestly, like I had a meeting the other day where the leader of a DMO kind of said, yeah, thanks for teaching me how to create all of these things, but like, can you just create them for me? And I think the answer is yes, let's just create them for you. Because at the end of the day, a DMO leader their job isn't to be sort of an AI specialist or an AI sort of expert, right? Their job is to be a DMO leader. So why don't we just arm you with the tools you need? And then over time, obviously people will get better at creating these tools on their own and that type of thing. But I think initially where people are at today, Let's just get them what they need, get them going, get them getting the most out of generative AI, because that's actually what's going to drive more adoption and more excitement and more investment over the long term.
Huge value add there, I think, Peter. Great to hear that those solutions are obviously in the works to be made available to tourism industry folks ASAP. Nice. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about this new partnership between one of our favorite generative AI folks in the industry. OpenAI has actually partnered with global media company Condé Nast, which if you haven't heard of, you've probably heard of a couple little publications they have across the globe called The New Yorker and Vogue. Tell us a little bit about what this partnership means for everybody, but also for the tourism industry specifically, Peter.
Yeah, so I mean, this partnership's, I think, the next partnership and a trend of things that we're seeing. So I think we're seeing these licensing deals happen between companies like OpenAI and others, Anthropic and others, with these high quality publications to license their data, to license their information. At the end of the day, that licensing deals like this are going to have a number of different impacts on the tourism industry. So obviously, as you mentioned, Emily, this Condé Nast, creates Vogue magazine as an example. So obviously that's a luxury magazine where likely a lot of luxury tourism brands will want to see themselves, right? And so to me, this speaks to the constant need for tourism marketers to start thinking more about PR than they did before. At the end of the day, getting mentioned in all of these different publications that have deals, licensing deals with companies like OpenAI, is the best way to make sure that your brand will be sort of visible to either ChatGPT or SearchGPT or Anthropic's Claude or Perplexity or any of these different organizations that are trying to get into the search game. Obviously, search is going to change. The SEO game is going to change. And so PR continues to be, in my mind, the most important shift from a marketing perspective in terms of how brands want to make sure that they're visible. Obviously, partnerships with organizations like Condé Nast specifically around, Vogue magazine, obviously, if you can do either a paid partnership with them or PR partnership with them to make sure that your brand is mentioned in there, that's just, again, another way for you to make sure that you're going to be mentioned in the next LLM in terms of how you're going to be visible. But I think more importantly, I would say that I still believe that there's a big role for DMOs to play in terms of doing licensing deals like this with AI companies as well. So I still think that there's a huge opportunity for, let's just say, a group of DMOs to come together. Maybe it's, BC DMOs, maybe it's in Canada, whatever that looks like. And then to package up all of the content that they create, and then to basically approach a company like OpenAI for a licensing play. So at the end of the day, these companies want access to high quality, well-researched, well-written content, and DMOs do that, right? DMOs are, in my mind, the best organizations on the planet when it comes to the highest quality content about everything related to a destination. And so let's not let these organizations rip our content off. Let's get proactive and let's package our information together and let's go do a licensing deal. So that's my big pitch. I've been pitching that for a little while. I've been talking to DMOs about that. There's interest in it. The how is a little more challenging, but I think mostly if everybody works together or if there are a group of people work together, we can figure out the how. So we're here. Tourism AI Network's here to help. And as I've been talking to a couple of industry partners about this already. And, as soon as we get the first one done or the first few done, I think that sort of opens the door for other ones. So, obviously be first in the gate is my pitch there.
100%. If you are tuning in for the very first time, welcome, welcome. But also, please do check out our episode from last week. We talked a lot about the future of search and AI, the value that PR is really going to have for you in terms of making sure that you are a face on whether it's Google or ChatGPT or Search GPT, etc. Check that out. But what I will say about, some of these licensing deals is definitely be the first out of the gate, as Peter noted. The first step that you can take today on your own, if that's something that you're interested in getting that sort of a deal in place, is make sure that your content is packaged neatly to be ready to display. Even if I would recommend doing that as any organization as well, because if these search engines versus, AI search engines, if you'll call them that, if they're picking up your data, you want it to be clean, you want it to be ready to present to folks. So always be updating that. We're going to shift gears one more time. We're still going to be talking about some of these marketing tools. There are over 100, well, there are probably hundreds at this point, of apps that are now being made and used for not just marketing, but hundreds of different generative AI use cases. But also one of the most interesting updates that we're seeing sort of in the design and marketing lens is Canva's latest partnership. Peter, why don't you shed some light on that for people who may not be yet aware?
Yeah, so Canva basically acquired an organization called Leonardo AI. So Leonardo AI is a pretty popular image generation tool. It's been my favorite image generation tool so far. Although I did mention Ideogram, which I tried this weekend, which is pretty cool because it spells things correctly. Although I would imagine companies like Leonardo AI and others, and I think actually this play with Canva will allow that spelling things correctly issue to be resolved over a matter. It's just a matter of time. But anyways, Canva's really been stepping up. So for those who don't know, Canva is I guess, a design tool that makes, I think, design a lot easier for a layman person. But also, designers use Canva more and more. Like our graphic designer actually designs in Canva a lot. And the reason for that is because Canva's competitor, which is Adobe, the Adobe suite of products, is a little harder to use. You need, it's fairly expensive. And so, a platform like Canva, our designer can design in Canva. We can all have access to it. And then, it's easy for us to basically make edits to the design. So, you're creating a PDF or whatever it is, in Canva, it's easy to go in there, change the words, move some things around, and all of a sudden you don't need to be a designer and you can sort of improve something. So anyways, we love Canva. We use it all the time. And then it's really exciting that they've acquired Leonardo AI and they're going to be baking Leonardo AI into its platform. And, Canva also did a partnership with Getty Images in the past. And so, really all that means is, to me, is one, they're with the Getty Images, they're going to have a lot more images in their database that people are going to be able to sort of choose from in terms of building designs from. And then obviously with Leonardo AI, now you're going to be able to just like prompt and create an image from scratch, and then you're going to be able to put it into the Canva platform and edit it and make things happen. So, Canva's all of a sudden a really big player in the design space. And this is pretty exciting because I think, Adobe's been sort of the dominant player for a very, very long time. And it's been, again, very sort of focused on the designer. And, it's sort of an expensive paid tool for the designer, nothing against that. But Canva is sort of that more accessible, easier to use tool for the non-designer. But again, designers are using it as well. So I think that this is really exciting news. And I think that what I think is going to happen, and this is kind of an interesting side note, I guess, or bigger picture, 30,000-foot view of this, is that there are a lot of tools. And we're going to talk about the 100 generative AI tools our consumers are using next. And there's actually thousands of tools out there. And what's going to end up happening is, I think that the best tools out there are going to end up being acquired by the biggest companies out there, right? So we've heard in recent months that Google's acquired this company, acquired that company, and these are all generative AI tools, companies that were building very specific tools for very specific use cases, and these are all just going to get baked into really the leading brands out there and the leading products out there. And so, I think the takeaway from this, from a AI perspective, is, yes, absolutely play with the various different tools carefully, but know that this is an evolving space, and that things are going to be constantly changing in the space. But mostly, if you're using some of the best tools in the market, the most well-known tools in the market, just sort of really invest your time and effort into those tools and understand how they're changing and what their AI roadmaps are like, so that you can sort of make the most out of your investment in those tools. I think that's my advice. We used to play with and invest in less expensive tools, and I'll just be honest with you, like, it's never worked out, or it's rarely worked out. Occasionally we come across a really cool non-expensive tool or whatever, or like not a, I don't even want to use the word expensive, but like not a very popular tool in the market, you know what I mean? Some fringe tool. Yeah, obviously sometimes you might get in early on a fringe tool, but for us, it's usually we end up going to the more popular tool. Like the popular tools are popular for a reason. And so I would just say, invest your time and energy into those tools and understand their AI capabilities as much as possible. And, you're going to see evolution happening constantly, and they're going to get better and better.
Totally. I would say image generation is probably one of those spaces where we're still going to see a lot of change. It's still pretty difficult for a lot of tools to produce quality AI images. You'll see it in the writing in those images. Obviously, it's great that we've got ideogram now. It's kind of cleaning that up a bit. But even just, in terms of prompts, sometimes it'll misunderstand what you're saying or it'll duplicate content in the image. So still a lot of room to grow there. I personally am very excited to see Canva acquire Leonardo AI just because no disrespect to Canva. I think they're a gold mine company. I think they've got a great idea and they've done a really great play in terms of getting it into the mainstream. But oh my word, their AI image generation was not great when we tested it a few months ago. So we kind of walked away from that. But great, decision on their part to acquire, and hopefully their AI images will be some of the best in the business.
And I think actually you just raised a good point there, Emily, in terms of something, again, we've talked about a bit, but when you test something, if it's not great, give it 6 months.
Totally.
So, don't assume that, oh, well, I tested this and doesn't work. We're in a different era now where things are changing so fast that we need to be constantly testing things. And so, one of the things that when we take people through the AI adoption framework is, creating an AI council. And so part of, the sort of scope of work for an AI council is, how often do we go back and retest tools? What criteria do we put on tools in terms of to decide which tools that we want to use, right? How do we make sure we're not all of a sudden paying for 50 different tools,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of thought that needs to go into that as an organization, and you need to sort of set up the rules of the game so that your staff know exactly what to do when it comes to tools, right? And again, I'm going to put a plug for Tourism AI Academy in here, in that our goal with the academy will be to test these tools for the tourism industry and to bring the tools to you with educational content, how to use them, how to get the most out of them. And I'll take a step back, because while I talked about specific tools in the context of Tourism AI Academy, really conceptually what we want to focus on there is more around principles. So, the principles out of getting the best image out of a prompt, and what you need to say in your prompt in order to actually get the best image out, and how do you edit the tool to get a better image out, those types of things, right? So while we're going to be sort of going through specific tools and use cases and things like that, I think to me it's around teaching people the conceptual frameworks, how to actually use these tools to their greatest advantage, because that's the other thing, right? You may go in and you may test the tool, but if you're not using a good prompting framework, as an example, you may not be getting good outcomes out of a good tool, right? So you might hear somebody be like, oh, this is the best tool that does this, and then you try it and you're like, this is terrible. And it's like, are you doing it well, right? And those are important questions to ask. So again, I think that if you think about creating an AI council in your organization, and you have some parameters around tool testing, it's like, okay, like I'll give you an example. It's like, maybe it's you come up with a really, really, really good prompt that is proven to do what you want it to do with one tool. And now you just use that same prompt when you're testing every other tool, so that you can actually have an apples to apples comparison of tools, and not, oh, I tried this one with one prompt, tried this one with a different prompt, and there's no consistency. So those are the types of things that I think that it's important for organizations to start thinking about to get the most out of these types of products and services.
Nice. Absolutely. Tools are no good if you don't know how to use them, but that's something that we can help you with and make sure that you're really fine tuning that process and you're all good there. All right. We're going to pivot one more time to our last story. 100 generative AI tools. Peter, what are the tools we need to know? What should we keep in mind when considering how many there are out there? What is there to know?
Yeah, so just to give some context to this article that we're referencing here, this is Andreessen Horowitz blog. Andreessen Horowitz does this, I think this is their second or third semi-annual or quarterly even. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to look for it here. Anyways, they basically sort of are trying to understand which tools are being used in the market the most. And then, they're trying to, generate some inferences from that. And so what they do actually is, every 6 months. So they take a deep dive into the data to rank the top 50 AI first web products by unique monthly visits, and then top 50 AI mobile products by monthly active users. So, there's no perfect way for us to know which tools are getting the most use, but I think that unique monthly visits to their website is probably a pretty good indicator that the popularity of a tool, right? And or monthly active users, that's obviously a pretty solid metric. So so a couple of things that came out of this report this time is that the last time they did it was March 2024, and nearly 30% of the companies on their list of tools are new. So again, as we were just talking about, is like there's a lot of tools on the market. It's impossible to keep up with all of these tools. Luckily, we are partnered with some people who seem to just do, I don't want to say they do nothing but play with tools, but they seem to know about a lot of tools, and they have a lot of experience, and they test a lot of things out. So again, we're going to be doing a lot of that work for you. But there's a couple interesting trends that come up. So first of all, ChatGPT has been the #1 generative AI tool since Andreessen Horowitz has been doing this, and that's actually consistent with quite a few other studies that are similar to this. But this survey result shows that the creative tools are growing the fastest. So 52% of the companies on the web list are focused on content generation or editing across modalities, so image, video, music, speech, and more. And of the 12 new entrants, 58% are creative tool space. So there's some other research out there that shows that marketing is the sort of the quickest adopter of generative AI, or marketing departments or marketing function. And this is just evidence of that, right? So marketers are using these tools, and for good reason. I mean, these tools do some amazing things when it comes to marketing, and there's more and more amazing tools coming out, right? So the four out of the top 5 first-time list makers are Luma, Vigil, CArt, and Udio. And these are all music generation tools and image generation tools and these types of things, video generation tools, right? So yeah, this just sort of shows that's kind of where the leading edge is, right? And so I think if you're a marketer today, this is a really good list, this Andreessen Horowitz list, to really start to understand what are the tools out there that are getting the most excitement. At 22% of the list makers, content editing for image and video is the most common use on mobile. So that obviously speaks to people using these for like social media applications. And so 22% of the list makers, it's the second largest product category of the mobile ranks. Users are eager to edit the content on their phones. So again, that shouldn't be a surprise. So this is like, there's a lot of I think that people that are leading this in a lot of ways are the content creators, on the social media platforms, right? That's where we're seeing a lot of innovations. But certainly from a tourism perspective, a lot of opportunity for tourism marketers here to start using tools. And again, I think this is probably going to be the first area of focus for Tourism AI Academy, is like, let's put out 25, 30 videos for you to show you how you can use these various different creative tools to get the most out of them.
Yeah, not as well to how many tools are actually coming out over, a very short span of time. We're seeing 100 and hundreds of new ones coming out all the time. So I mean, like we've said before, test them, try them out, see which ones work for you. But keep in mind, as we've kind of said earlier, some of those more popular ones that stand out are probably going to be your best bet. But always give them a go.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention is that while ChatGPT is definitely the #1 product on the web and mobile, and by quite a large margin, so ChatGPT is by far the most used generative AI tool on the market, but it's getting more competitive. And so Perplexity, which we talked about, I think on the last podcast, is #3 on the web. And so, it's getting a lot of love. People are really, really starting to use Perplexity a lot. And then our Anthropic's Claude, which is probably the most direct competitor to ChatGPT, has entered the top 5 at #4 for the first time. And so, Claude, for those who don't know, is a large language model tool that is multimodal to some extent and does a lot of the things that ChatGPT does. And they recently launched something called Artifacts, which is sort of a competition to custom GPTs. And so, these artifacts allow you to get a lot more out of Claude in terms of being able to put in very specific information, company information, to get specific outcomes. And, we haven't used Claude a lot yet. We're going to start experimenting with it a lot more here. But from everything I've heard and all the people I've talked to, excuse me, Claude is definitely the best in terms of producing really good, high quality written language. So people really like it as a writing tool, or the way it writes. It writes more like a human. It sounds more like a human. So, from everything I've heard, it's the best kind of writing tool in the market. And so we're going to be sort of baking it into a lot of our processes. We're still likely going to use ChatGPT as our main workhorse, but I think we're going to be incorporating Claude into our workflows as well, because of its superior writing ability. Although, what I will say about all of these things is that as the state of the art keeps getting moved, these people's impressions of these things keep changing, right? So again, I think that I would strongly encourage people to focus on learning how to use generative AI with various different frameworks and different prompting techniques and experimenting with that more than experimenting with the various different tools. So, that's not to say don't experiment with the tools, but, if ChatGPT 5 comes out or whatever they call it comes out and it's all of a sudden vastly superior to Claude from a writing perspective, then we're going to probably see a shift again back to more people using that tool, right? So I think it's really important for people to not get too hung up on the tools. I was hung up on the tools for a long time, Emily, and I was like, oh, I don't want to invest a lot of energy into, building all of our processes and systems around ChatGPT because what if something better comes out? And again, Claude has come out and people are saying it's better at certain things, but we can't keep moving back and forth from tool to tool. We kind of have to commit to one. And at the end of the day, they're all really, really good. And so, and the other thing I'll say too is that, there's the state of the art. So these are like the most advanced models, but there's a lot of times where you don't need the state of the art, where you need maybe not as good of a model, but it's faster and it's cheaper. So that's better, right? And so even the state of the art, while there's a lot of competition for the state of the art, that may not be what your organization needs, right? And so I think there's just a lot of value in just understanding the industry a lot better and understanding the differences between the state of the art and not the state of the art. And, if you're going to, start building on top of these tools, maybe price is more important, maybe speed is more important, right? And so you really need to start thinking about this a little more holistically than, this tool is better today and that tool is better tomorrow, right?
100%. And I think too, different use cases for different tools, right? Obviously, we were accessing Canva on the paid model because we needed it for design, period. But we weren't engaging in it at all from an AI perspective, just because it wasn't there yet. Obviously, we were using Leonardo AI on a free model. That's going to look a little bit different now that you've got paid versus free on Canva. I don't know what that's going to, what the difference there is going to be, but just in terms of, we're pretty firmly in the ChatGPT camp, but we're still going to use Claude on the free model. And that could change depending on, the different features that Anthropic wants to roll out. I think right now for us, it makes more sense to use the team functions that OpenAI is presenting us with versus, like you said, Peter, switching from all of these different tools to different ones all the time. That doesn't make a lot of sense for anybody. So just be mindful that you don't have to, pay for all of these tools. You can still use them on the free version. Check out what they have to offer and see what makes sense for your team if you're going to be forking over cash.
Yeah, and I think that also what I will add to that, Emily, is that, for example, we may use ChatGPT team as our primary quote unquote workhorse and the thing that sort of is our core AI tool that we use. But maybe Ben from our team, who's our PR guy, might use Claude because he does the most writing. And maybe Jay might have a paid account to Perplexity because he does the most research for us, right? And so, maybe team-wise, we're all here, but individuals for very specific tasks and functions are maybe using some of the other tools and incorporating those into their processes, right? So, and I think one of the things I've heard from a lot of people is, wow, these tools can get really expensive really fast. And it's like, yes, that is absolutely true. But if you think about the, $20 a month or whatever it is, I recommend to people is make yourself a budget for generative AI tools. At our company, it's $500 a month, and we're not even close to spending that much money at all. But if you think about if you're getting the value out of them, then the cost shouldn't be that big of a barrier, right? I mean, if you're speeding up your processes, now that speaks to the need to sort of have systems and processes and measurement in place to actually understand the value you're getting. So that's where our AI adoption framework plays a role. And that's where, creating an AI council and creating goals and creating metrics and all those things matter. But in the longer term, at the end of the day, likely the cost of these tools is going to be fairly moot point when in comparison to the value that they can generate and the speed and the accuracy and all the different things that they can do. But certainly I think just don't go out and start spending a lot of money on a lot of tools. The other thing I'll say too is it's a little cheaper usually to buy these tools if you pay for a year up front, but you shouldn't be doing that at the beginning, right? You should be just paying for a month at a time to test with very specific use cases, very specific metrics, very specific things you're trying to accomplish. And then you should be basically measuring your outcomes as based on the, what you're trying to accomplish to determine if the value is there. And then over, maybe a 3-month period, then it's like, okay, yeah, we found the value of the use case here. Let's bake this into our processes and into our longer term budget, right? So the other thing I'll say is no business came into 2024 with $50,000 budgets or whatever it is for generative AI. And so, we need to walk before or crawl before we walk, and then walk before we run, right? I think that we're going to be in a place in the next couple of years where people are making bigger investments. And this really speaks to even the first article that we talked about, the Deloitte survey, is like, yes, the enterprises are spending a lot of money trying to figure out how to get the most out of generative AI. But for smaller and medium-sized businesses, like just like a $20 a month tool is probably a really good starting point, and like building really strong testing and experimentation around that $20 tool to make sure you can get the most value out of it. It's a really good starting point, right? So don't get too excited about all the different tools and all the different places, because you can spend a lot of money really fast. Like, just be really focused and narrow, and I think you're going to see the value.
Totally. AI is not one size fits all for your team or the individuals on your team. That's where, an AI council can really come in handy. You can test those things without having too many cooks in the kitchen. So something to drop us a line about if you're interested. We have so many ideas, solutions, things that we can put in your playbook for you to better use AI and better optimize your team. So if that's of interest, please do drop us a line. You can catch Peter online at Tourism AI Guy, or you can find us on the web. We've got a site. It's the tourismainetwork.com. We hope to see you next week. Subscribe.
Actually, Emily, we're going to be not around next week. So we are taking a slight hiatus from the podcast for the next week or two. We're making some changes, introducing a couple of things. And I'm going to be away on holidays. And on top of that, I live on a water main in Calgary that's being ripped up. So it's going to be very loud around my house for the next few weeks. So we're going to just take a little break for the next couple of weeks. It's going to be back to school anyways, and we're going to be coming back with a new format. We're going to be launching some new services and some new things. So we're sort of shifting and transitioning into the next phase of Tourism AI Network, and we hope you join us as we evolve.
Amazing. Thanks, Peter. We will be cooking up some great things over here, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. To learn more about the network or get involved, visit our website at tourismainetwork.com or find us on socials at Tourism AI Network. We'll see you there.